Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we're diving into something that might sound like it belongs in a science fiction novel, but I promise you, the financial implications are very real. A new paper out of the physics world is shaking the foundations of how we understand the universe, and if you think that doesn't affect your portfolio, think again.
I'm Maya Clarity, and Alex, you're absolutely right. Tonight we're covering a groundbreaking new paper published on AR14 that proposes an entirely new mechanism for how black holes, gravitational waves, and dark matter could have formed in the early universe. The paper is titled Cosmological Bounce Relics, Black Holes, Gravitational Waves, and Dark Matter, and it challenges one of the most dominant paradigms in modern physics. The financial world should be paying very close attention.
Before we dive in, let me set the stage for our viewers. We're living in an era where the line between theoretical physics and financial markets is getting thinner by the day. Quantum computing firms, space technology companies, gravitational wave detection startups, billions of dollars are flowing into sectors that are built on our understanding of fundamental physics. When that understanding shifts, the money follows. So buckle up.
And I want to emphasize, this isn't speculative cable news filler. This is a peer-submitted research paper on AR14, the premier preprint server where physicists share cutting-edge research. This is where discoveries go before they become Nobel Prizes. What's in this paper could reshape entire research funding pipelines, and that means it reshapes where governments and corporations place their bets.
So let's get into it. Truth Report starts now.
Alright, Alex, let's break this down. The paper, AR14 reference 2602.17702, proposes what the authors call a bouncing universe model. Now, for decades, the dominant theory of how our universe began has been cosmic inflation, this idea that the universe underwent a rapid exponential expansion in its earliest moments, fractions of a second after the Big Bang. That theory has driven billions in research funding globally.
And here's where it gets interesting from a financial perspective. The inflation model isn't just an academic curiosity. It's the theoretical backbone for massive projects like LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, which cost over $1 billion to build. It underpins the scientific justification for the European Space Agency's LISA mission, a space-based gravitational wave detector with a price tag in the billions of euros. When you challenge inflation, you're challenging the rationale for some of the most expensive scientific instruments ever built.
Exactly. So what does this bouncing universe model propose instead? Rather than the universe springing from a singularity and inflating outward, the authors suggest that our universe went through a contraction phase before bouncing back into expansion. Think of it like a cosmic rubber ball. The universe squeezed down to an incredibly dense state and then bounced outward. And during that squeeze, that pre-bounce collapse phase, fascinating things happened.
According to the paper, Cosmological Relics, and by relics, we mean black holes, gravitational waves, and potentially dark matter itself, formed through two distinct channels during this bounce. The first channel involves compact objects and gravitational waves that were produced during the pre-bounce collapse phase. These objects remained what physicists call superhorizon, meaning they were larger than the observable universe at the time, and they only re-entered our observable universe after the bounce occurred.
The second channel is even more provocative. The authors propose that dark matter halos, these massive structures of invisible matter that we know exist because of their gravitational effects on galaxies, formed during the collapse phase, exited the cosmic horizon, and then collapsed into black holes when they re-entered after the bounce. This is a fundamentally different origin story for primordial black holes than anything the inflation model offers.
And here's why the finance world needs to care. Dark matter research is a multi-billion-dollar global enterprise. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN, which cost approximately $10 billion to build and hundreds of millions annually to operate, has spent significant resources searching for dark matter particles predicted by models that assume inflationary cosmology. Underground detectors like Xenon, LUX Zeppelin, and Panda X represent hundreds of millions more in investment, all hunting for weakly interacting massive particles, or WIMPs.
If this bouncing universe model gains traction, and the dark matter origin story shifts from particle physics to gravitational collapse during a cosmic bounce, the implications for research funding allocation are staggering. We're talking about a potential paradigm shift that could redirect billions in government science budgets away from particle detector experiments and toward gravitational wave astronomy and cosmological observation programs.
Let's talk about who benefits and who loses in this scenario. On the winner's side, you've got companies and institutions involved in gravitational wave detection. The LIGO scientific collaboration, which includes Caltech and MIT, would see their work become even more central to fundamental physics. Space-based detection missions like LISA would gain stronger scientific justification. Companies developing advanced laser interferometry and precision measurement technology would see increased demand.
And on the losing side, or at least the side that faces disruption, you've got the particle physics establishment. Now, I want to be clear, CERN and the Large Collider experiments do extraordinary science across many domains. But the dark matter search has been a major justification for continued investment, and if the theoretical ground shifts beneath that search, funding committees in Washington, Brussels, Beijing, and Tokyo are going to ask hard questions about where the next $1 billion should go.
There's also a deeper power structure question here that Truth Report always asks. The inflation model has been the dominant cosmological paradigm for over 40 years. It has its own establishment, its own funding networks, its own career pipelines. Senior physicists who built their careers on inflation aren't going to welcome a competing model with open arms. We've seen this pattern before in science. Entrenched paradigms resist change not because the science is settled, but because careers, reputations, and funding streams depend on the status quo.
That's a critical point, Alex. The sociology of science funding is something most people never think about, but it drives which theories get tested, which experiments get built, and ultimately which version of reality we accept as true. The bouncing universe model has been around in various forms for years, but it's consistently struggled to get the same level of attention and funding as inflationary models. This paper could change that dynamic.
Now let's dig into the technical details a bit more, because the devil is always in the details when it comes to both physics and finance. The paper describes how during the contracting phase of the bouncing universe, matter would have been compressing, and density perturbations, tiny variations in the distribution of matter, would have been amplified. These amplified perturbations could have reached the threshold for gravitational collapse, forming primordial black holes directly.
What's particularly elegant about this mechanism, and I use that word deliberately because elegance matters in theoretical physics, it often signals we're closer to truth, is that it provides a unified explanation for multiple cosmological phenomena. Instead of needing separate mechanisms to explain primordial black holes, the gravitational wave background, and dark matter, the bouncing universe model generates all three from the same physical process. One mechanism, three major cosmological mysteries potentially solved.
And from an investment thesis perspective, that kind of unification is extremely compelling. When a single theory explains multiple previously disconnected observations, it tends to attract rapid scientific consensus. Think about how quickly the scientific community rallied around plate tectonics once it became clear that one theory could explain earthquakes, volcanic activity, mountain formation, and the shapes of continents. Money follows consensus, and consensus follows explanatory power.
Let's talk about the gravitational wave signature specifically, because this is where the rubber meets the road for verification and, consequently, for investment decisions. The paper predicts specific characteristics of the gravitational wave background that would be produced by a bouncing universe, and these predictions are different from what inflationary models predict. This means we have a testable distinction. Current and next-generation gravitational wave detectors could potentially distinguish between these two scenarios.
And that's where the smart money should be paying attention. The next generation of gravitational wave detectors, projects like the Einstein Telescope in Europe and Cosmic Explorer in the United States, are currently in planning and early development phases. These are multi-billion-dollar projects that will need sustained funding over the coming decades. If the bouncing universe model proves correct, the scientific case for these detectors becomes even stronger, because they'd be testing a fundamental theory of cosmic origins, not just observing astrophysical events.
There's also a growing commercial space around gravitational wave technology that most investors aren't tracking. Precision measurement technologies developed for LIGO have spin-off applications in navigation, mining exploration, earthquake prediction, and even financial trading, where microsecond timing advantages can be worth millions. Companies working on atom interferometry, quantum sensors, and precision laser systems all benefit from increased investment in gravitational wave science.
Let me bring up another angle that I think is underappreciated. The paper mentions that the primordial black holes formed in this bouncing scenario could account for some or all of dark matter. If primordial black holes are dark matter, or a significant component of it, this has implications for the search for new physics beyond the standard model. The hundreds of millions of dollars currently spent on underground dark matter detectors searching for exotic particles might be looking for something that doesn't exist in the way we assumed.
And that's not just a theoretical problem, it's an allocation of resources problem. Every dollar spent searching for a particle that may not exist in that form is a dollar not spent on gravitational wave observation, on space-based detectors, on computational cosmology that could actually test the bouncing universe model. Science funding is a zero-sum game, especially in an era of fiscal austerity. The opportunity cost of backing the wrong paradigm is measured in decades of delayed discovery.
Now I want to address something that our more scientifically literate viewers might be thinking. They might say, Alex, this is one paper on AR-14. It hasn't even been peer-reviewed yet. Aren't you jumping the gun? And that's a fair point. But here's what I'd say in response. First, the AR14 preprint model is how modern physics works. Papers go up, they get scrutinized by the global community in real time, and the feedback process is often more rigorous than traditional peer review. Second, we're not saying this paper is the final word. We're saying it represents a growing body of work challenging the inflationary paradigm, and that growing body of work has financial implications that are being ignored.
Absolutely. And I'd add that the Bouncing Cosmology research program has been gaining momentum. There have been multiple papers in recent years exploring various aspects of bouncing universes, from the mathematical consistency of the bounce itself to the observational signatures we should look for. This paper, AR14 2602.17702, adds a significant new piece to that puzzle by showing how the bounce mechanism can naturally produce the right abundance and mass distribution of primordial black holes, gravitational waves with specific spectral properties, and a dark matter candidate, all at once.
Let's zoom out and talk about what this means for the broader landscape of science and technology investment. We're in a period that some have called a second quantum revolution, where fundamental physics is driving commercial technology at an unprecedented pace. Quantum computing, quantum sensing, quantum communication, these are all multi-billion-dollar markets that emerge directly from our understanding of quantum mechanics. If our understanding of cosmology undergoes a similar revolution, the commercial implications could be equally transformative.
And here's the pattern that Truth Report has been tracking across multiple stories. In sector after sector, we're seeing established paradigms challenged by new data and new theoretical frameworks. In energy, the fossil fuel paradigm is being challenged by renewables. In finance, the traditional banking paradigm is being challenged by decentralized systems. In medicine, the pharmaceutical paradigm is being challenged by gene therapy. And now, in fundamental physics, the inflationary paradigm is being challenged by bouncing cosmology. The common thread is that entrenched interests resist change, and early movers who recognize the shift capture enormous value.
That pattern recognition is what separates Truth Report from surface-level news coverage. We don't just report what happened, we ask who benefits, who resists, and what the underlying power dynamics are. In this case, the beneficiaries of a paradigm shift toward bouncing cosmology would include gravitational wave astronomers, computational cosmologists, precision measurement technology companies, and space agencies with observation missions in the pipeline.
The resistors would include elements of the particle physics establishment who have built careers and secured funding around inflation-dependent models, underground dark matter detection experiments that might lose their primary scientific justification, and anyone whose theoretical framework depends on the specific predictions of cosmic inflation. This isn't to say these scientists are acting in bad faith, they're doing important work within the paradigm they were trained in. But the sociology of scientific revolutions, as Thomas Kuhn documented decades ago, shows that paradigm shifts always face institutional resistance.
Let's also consider the geopolitical dimension, because physics funding is increasingly a matter of national competition. China has been investing heavily in particle physics, including plans for a massive new collider that would dwarf CERN's Large Hadron Collider. If the theoretical justification for that collider, specifically, its dark matter search capability, is undermined by a paradigm shift toward bouncing cosmology, China's science strategy might need to pivot. The same goes for Japan's investment in the Hypercameo detector and Europe's planned future circular collider.
Meanwhile, the United States has been investing in next-generation gravitational wave detectors and space-based observation platforms. If the bouncing universe model gains traction, the U.S. could find itself with a strategic advantage in the most important area of fundamental physics research. That's not a coincidence. The U.S. has historically been strong in astronomy and astrophysics, while Europe and Asia have led in particle physics. A paradigm shift could reshape the global scientific pecking order, with all the economic and strategic implications that entails.
There's one more dimension I want to explore before we wrap up this story, and it's about the philosophy of science itself. The inflationary model has been criticized by some prominent physicists, including Roger Penrose, Paul Steinhardt, and Anna Aegis, for being unfalsifiable. The argument is that inflation can be adjusted to match almost any observation, which means it doesn't make the kind of sharp, testable predictions that good science requires. The bouncing universe model, as described in this paper, does make specific predictions about the gravitational wave spectrum, the mass distribution of primordial black holes, and the properties of dark matter.
And testability is the gold standard of science. A theory that makes specific predictions that can be confirmed or refuted by observation is always preferable to one that can accommodate any result. If the bouncing universe model's predictions are confirmed by the next generation of gravitational wave detectors, it wouldn't just be a scientific revolution. It would be a vindication of the principle that science should be driven by falsifiable predictions, not by mathematical elegance or institutional inertia.
Now let's step back and synthesize everything we've covered tonight. We've looked at a single paper on AR-14 that proposes a new mechanism for generating black holes, gravitational waves, and dark matter in a bouncing universe. But the implications extend far beyond theoretical physics. This paper sits at the intersection of science funding policy, geopolitical competition, technology investment, and the philosophy of scientific progress.
The financial implications alone are worth tracking. We're talking about the potential reallocation of tens of billions of dollars in global research funding. We're talking about a shift in which technologies get developed and commercialized. We're talking about which countries gain strategic advantages in fundamental science. And we're talking about which investment thesis, particle physics or gravitational wave astronomy, delivers the best returns over the coming decades.
The pattern we see here at Truth Report is one we've documented again and again. Established institutions resist paradigm shifts because their funding, careers, and reputations depend on the current paradigm. Outsider ideas struggle to get attention not because they lack merit, but because they lack institutional backing. And when the shift finally comes, it comes faster than anyone expected, and those who positioned early capture disproportionate value.
For our viewers who are investors, the actionable insight is this: watch the gravitational wave detection sector closely. Watch for follow-up papers that test the predictions of the bouncing universe model. Watch for shifts in science funding rhetoric from agencies like NASA, the National Science Foundation, the European Research Council, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. If the language starts shifting from testing inflation to exploring alternative cosmologies, that's your signal that the paradigm is turning.
For our viewers who are scientists or science policy advocates, the message is equally clear. We need funding mechanisms that can support paradigm-challenging research, not just paradigm-confirming research. The history of science tells us that the biggest breakthroughs come from challenging the consensus, not from refining it. If the bouncing universe model is right, we'll look back at the decades we spent searching for inflationary signatures and dark matter particles and wonder why we didn't take the alternatives more seriously, sooner.
And for everyone watching, whether you're an investor, a scientist, a policymaker, or just someone who wants to understand how the universe works, the takeaway is this: pay attention to the edges of established knowledge. That's where the revolutions happen. That's where the truth lives. And that's what we're here to report.
Before we sign off, I want to come back to something fundamental. The paper we discussed tonight, AR-14 2602.17702, is about the origins of the universe. It's about where black holes come from, what gravitational waves tell us, and what dark matter actually is. These are some of the deepest questions humanity has ever asked. And the answers to those questions have real-world consequences, for how we allocate resources, for how we structure our scientific institutions, and for how we understand our place in the cosmos.
That's the thing about fundamental science that gets lost in the funding debates and the institutional politics. At its core, this is about human curiosity. It's about our drive to understand the universe we live in. The bouncing universe model offers a beautiful, testable, and potentially unifying explanation for some of the biggest mysteries in cosmology. Whether it turns out to be right or wrong, the fact that scientists are pursuing it is a testament to what's best about the scientific enterprise.
And that's exactly why we cover these stories on Truth Report. Because the truth doesn't just live in congressional hearings and corporate boardrooms. It lives in the equations that describe the earliest moments of the universe. It lives in the data streaming from gravitational wave detectors. And it lives in the willingness of researchers to challenge the paradigm, even when the establishment pushes back.
So keep asking questions. Keep following the money. Keep watching where the research dollars flow, because they tell you what the people in power think is true, and sometimes, what they're afraid might be true.
That's all for tonight's Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and we'll see you next time.
Good night, everyone. And remember, the truth is always worth the search.